Secondary dominance. So I have a whole blog post that talks about the importance of the dominant seventh chord. The gist of it is going to be our 5 to 1. All right. So in the key of C, that'd be C, G7, and then back to C. All right. The reason why it's called a dominant chord is because it dominates the key and it really tells us where it is that we're going. So secondary dominants are going to be doing the same thing. It's going to be telling us where we're going, only it's going to be revolving around other chords in the key. All right, so I'm going to give you an example in the key of C. All right, my chord numbers in the key of C are going to be C as my 1, D minor as my 2, E minor as my 3, F as my 4, G as my 5, A minor as my 6, and then C is my 1. So my secondary dominants are going to be the dominance of those chords that I just played, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, and the 6. So how do we find those? All right, let's take, for example, my D minor chord, all right, which is my 2. There's a couple different ways to find it. One is look on my theory sheet, go to the chord, D for example, look at the 5th column in, and that is going to say A7, boom, we play an A7 before my D minor, all right? Another way to do this is to play this as bar chords. So if I have a bar chord on the 5th string, then the dominant is going to be on the 6th string, the exact same fret. So my D minor is here on the 5th fret, 5th string. So now my dominant 7 is going to be the 6th string on the 5th fret, a dominant 7 bar chord. In this case, it's an A7. All right, so two different ways that we can find it. There's another way too, which is going to be playing it on the 6th string and then using my 5th string dominant 7 bar chord 2 frets up on the 5th string. Alright, so if my D minor is here on the 10th fret, I go on the 5th string 2 frets higher, 12th fret on the 5th string. Another way to go through it is actually going to be using our chord numbers. So we can assign, okay, A7 is my dominant of my D minor. What I do is I figure out what chord number that is. So I know C is my 1, D minor is my 2, E minor is my 3, F is my 4, G is my 5, A minor is my 6. So my 6th chord as a dominant 7 is going to bring us to our 2. Alright, so those are just a couple ways that we can find out what the dominant chord of each of our chords in the key that we're working with, how we can find them. Let's actually go through all the chord numbers in the key of C and figure out what their dominant 7th would be. Alright, so for my D minor, it'd be the 6 as a dominant 7th chord, or A7. For my E minor, my 3 chord, this is going to be B7. Alright, my B7 is also the 7th chord of the scale, but it's as a dominant 7. Alright, my F is my 4 chord, and this is going to be my 1 as a dominant 7, or a C7 to my F. Next is my G chord, or my 5 chord, and my dominant 7 for my G is going to be D7, or my 2. Alright, next we have my A minor, which is my 6, and that is going to be E7, or my 3 chord, as a dominant 7th chord. So now that we have a couple different ways to find them, let's actually see this being utilized. I'm going to be using the example of a 1, 6, 2, 5 in the key of C, and so that is going to be a C, A minor, D minor, G. Alright, and find out a couple different ways that we can implement some of the dominant chords of those numbers to kind of give us a little bit more flair to that chord progression. Alright, so first what I'm going to do is I have a C, next chord is an A minor. What if I do the 5 of the 6? So my 3 as a dominant to that A minor. So I could kind of put that in on the last beat, or maybe I could split that C up into half C, then half of that 3 as a dominant chord that will then lead us into our A minor. Let's see how that sounds. Alright, pretty neat. Another option would be to, we have our 5 of our 6th chord. How about our 5 of our 2 chord? Our 5 of our 2 chord is our 6. So, my 6 as a dominant to our 2. Alright, so let's go C, E7, there we go. What I did was I added the 5 of the 6th chord, then I did half of the 6 as a minor, then I turned that 6th chord into a dominant 7, and then continued on to my 2 and my 5. Let's take that one step further now and go for our 5 of our 5, which is our 2 chord as a dominant 7. All right, so we have C for 2 beats, E7 for 2 beats, A minor for 2 beats, A7 for 2 beats, D minor for 2 beats, D7 for 2 beats, G. And since G is my dominant of C, I can also do G for 2 beats and then G7 for 2 beats too. Alright, kind of neat. The last thing that we can do is that I picked this chord progression for a reason, is that since they all kind of can act as a dominant chord to the next chord there. So we have C, and then instead of doing our 6th chord as a minor chord, we can just turn that into a dominant. We can just turn my 2, since we know the next chord is going to be 5, and 2 is the dominant of our 5. We can turn that into a dominant chord, and then our G7 into a dominant chord. So we can actually just, it's kind of a nice little cycle. So it goes 1 chord, and then it's the 6, which is the 5 of 2, 2, which is the 5 of 5, and then 5, which is the 5 of 1. Alright, so there are some ways that we could find our secondary dominants and a couple different ways to utilize them.